Welcome to the Integration Station. I'm your host, Michael, a child and adolescent occupational therapist, and with me today is Eleanor.
I'm also a child and adolescent occupational therapist.
Welcome, Eleanor.
Thank you, Michael.
Happy birthday for yesterday, by the way.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah, you have a nice day?
I did have a very nice day. Got to hang out with you. That's not typical for us on a Wednesday.
No.
Made my day.
Oh, that's lovely.
Amongst other things.
Amongst other things.
Yeah, it was lovely though.
It was good. That's nice. Well, the weather's been a bit funny here, but a nice day nonetheless.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, very nice.
Very good.
Did you miss me on the podcast last week?
You had
to do a solo one.
I went solo. Eli and I had a bit of time together, a bit of bonding time. I was doing my soliloquy to the camera. So
practicing your radio presenter.
I think so.
TV presenter.
Yeah. So if anybody has any feedback on that, then they can pop that through to our Instagram at OTFC group, or if you have any actual questions, please send them through to that. Otherwise, podcast OTFC group. We had some questions come through, which is great.
We did. We had lots.
And I'm glad to see people are still using the email address. I don't know. I feel like email is pretty accessible. People are on their phones all the time and just pop a quick email, and podcast OTFC group.au is a pretty easy address to get. So yeah, send them through. We'll filter through and try and answer every single one of them where we can. We do have our Q&A format, finding the fun and learning how to support the young people. And we also have some regular segments.
We do.
So we might get started with those.
Sounds good.
Therapy activity of the week.
So the activity that I came up with this week was, actually I did it last week, but I did it again this week in a modified version, was we have a balance beam at the Myland site, and we've got heaps of little whiteboards now because I bought a whole bunch because, I don't know, just like mini whiteboards. So we ended up doing balance beam Pictionary.
Okay, what does that look like?
So what it looks like is a person is on the balance beam, and before they get on the balance beam, they get a card with a whole bunch of different categories. They have to pick up the card, have a look at what it is, and whilst they're balancing on the beam, they have to draw the picture, get to the end in 30 seconds, and the other person has to guess it.
Oh,
and if you both
cool.
work together and get it, you get a point. If you don't, finish the session. You're done. No.
You're done. See you later.
See you later. And then you swap it over each time.
Okay, that's cool. How did that work out for the friend that you're hanging out with?
Do you know what? Really interesting. The person I was hanging out with is a magnificent drawer. Like, he's excellent.
Oh, that's very cool.
But it was so interesting to see how hard it was for him to draw whilst he was balancing, because his balance is quite challenged. Okay. Right? So, it's a goal of his to work on his posture and his balance. But you could see how much impact it is drawing. His drawings were pretty much on par with mine. Yeah. And I'm pretty average. But my balance is okay.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Right? So, yeah.
The strengths and the tricky aspects kind of evened out.
Correct. But he enjoyed it.
I thought you were just low-key saying that you're a phenomenal drawer, and you're like, look, he even matched
how
incredible I was.
Not at all. Not at all, no. So yeah, it was good, and we did that for quite a while actually. We got some other people involved. Had a young person who language is really hard, but communicates through writing things down, and was able to be part of the game and engage really well.
Cool.
Yeah, so that was really cool.
Okay, that's awesome. I love hearing that you used young person that you're working with, their strengths with something that's harder, make that more motivating for them, because I think it's very easy to avoid things that feel that little bit tricky if we don't have the incentive to tackle them.
Correct.
And if balance is a little bit more challenging for them, it's a good combination.
Great. What's yours?
A lot of my sessions have been more kind of like talking based in the last couple of weeks. I've been doing some sessions at the Myland space, so working with more teenagers and young adults, and actually even in my usual sessions on a Monday. But I've done some really cool like interoception work with some of my clients this week, which has been awesome. So for one of them, we ended up making a little bit of a chart. We had a body chart as well to kind of check in about what different feelings, how things manifest in the body. And I think what that really supported in those conversations with them is that they're very aware of their different body cues, but actually the next step of, but what does that mean when I have a fast heart rate, when I'm feeling like they describe this kind of buzzing feeling in their body pretty consistently. And it's, yes, we're very aware of what that looks like, but then what's our body actually trying to tell us about what's happening around us and our internal states. And I think that was really cool to start there, because then that's, set them a bit of a task over this week to go, hey, just try and make even a brief note when you get those feelings, where you are, what you're doing, and we'll see if we can maybe put some things together over our upcoming sessions, which is cool.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice
There's
dialogue.
lots of really great, I guess, interoception frameworks or tools that you can use, anything with the Kelly Mailer. She's got some really excellent resources, but there's, even just something as simple as what we had with the body chart. And, sometimes I'll be, maybe doing some activities in the space and I'm drawing something like that on the whiteboard or bringing it into like shaving cream. So it doesn't even have to be anything too flash. It can support some really helpful conversations.
Yeah. Well, yeah, as you said, there are some interoceptive curriculum books out there, or curriculum that's there. Yeah, Kelly Mailer's one.
Yeah.
And there's some books out there as well. One, the Australian one, there's an interoception book. I think it's Dr. Emma Goodall is one of the authors of it, which has some really nice information about body mapping and those sort of things as well.
Cool.
So good resources.
Yeah. And this one, actually, we did it as like a bit of a telehealth session too.
Cool.
So it was a great thing to, just even chat through when they weren't able to come into the space. So I think very versatile in how you can have those conversations as well.
All right. Regulation strategy of the week.
Yeah.
Regulation, the strategy of the week.
I might jump in with one that I'm hoping to do this afternoon. I'll have to circle back in an upcoming episode to see how it all went. But I have a plan with another telehealth client that I see to make like sensory bags to have at home. So using what's going to be just a Ziploc bag with oil, water, food colouring, and whatever else we have around the place to add to that, just to get a bit of that tactile, visual input, having that success in making something at home.
Yeah, cool.
And then it's got something that they can access after that. So I think that will be pretty cool.
Recommendation would be to double bag it in case the first Ziploc bag does break.
Okay, I can
Tape
definitely
the
do
top,
that.
So in case anything spills,
Yeah.
goes into another bag and don't get oil and food colouring everywhere.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, nice.
Not here for the chaos, Michael.
No.
Just like to have it contained.
I like
love
the
how
idea.
everything I suggest with these things, you're always like, oh, it's my worst nightmare.
Yeah, well, I think of it from like at home, if it was my son doing it, like the amount of mess that would happen and the amount of cleanup that would have to happen after
Yeah.
that. So I'm always thinking from that perspective. So yes, any parents out there, good to have that hat on sometimes.
Okay,
as
that's
well.
fair.
So,
Or be just there to embrace the mess.
you know what? Some people are really good at embracing the mess, like messy play.
Yeah.
There we go. That's an unintentional regulation strategy, but
Brilliant.
messy food play.
Yeah.
When the weather's okay and you can do it outside, and you've got a big mat or tarpaulin that you can quickly just hose off.
Yeah.
So that's the sound of a hose, by the way. You can hose off after. You can just get a range of things that you can just put out there that are obviously safe to eat. But I know people have put, food colouring with spaghetti and a whole range of fun.
Like rice and stuff.
Yeah, rice, all that sort of stuff that is actually safe to eat, but it can encourage exploration and can be quite regulating, particularly for those that, not that I'm always one to subscribe to the sensory profile quadrants, but those that would be considered in inverted commas sensory seekers, they can really seek out a lot of that tactile input.
Yeah.
And if that's something they are seeking out, then why not provide even more input?
Yeah, for sure.
And that's certainly one way of doing it. So there you go.
I think heading into I think there's options there, whether it's a wintry day, you can do some sensory-based stuff inside, or if it's a little bit nicer, head outside for that messy food play.
Yeah.
You got options.
Yeah. Or jumping in puddles like my son did the other day, but he wasn't wearing boots. And so obviously everything got absolutely soaked. So
Yeah. Did he have the best time though?
he enjoyed it. Yeah. He certainly enjoyed it. But he was walking around apparently with one shoe and one sock only. The other one was completely
Okay.
saturated. So all good. Well, let's get to some questions.
Yeah.
There were two questions. I sort of combined them together, and it was about parenting stuff. So
Okay.
one was about the managing expectations when one parent is on board and maybe another one is not with
Yes.
regard to therapy.
Yes.
And I guess not just therapy, it could
Yeah.
be anything really. But there was another question that actually came in regarding what's considered reasonable expectations for a parent. And this one actually came off the back of a conversation I was actually having with a parent who was discussing about what they were considering reasonable expectations for a parent in regards to what NDIS considerations are.
Yeah.
So for those that may know, those that may not, in Australia we have the National Disability Insurance Scheme, and within that it is a government funded scheme to support young people with additional needs, as well as across the lifespan, but from our sake, young people. And it talks about reasonable expectations of a parent in the documentation. Yeah. And as there's a whole, and I can send put links to it. There's a whole set of guidelines and what's reasonable and necessary supports. And within that, there is that question about what's a reasonable expectation for a parent. And it made me think about, well, what is actually reasonable? And I have this situation where I can put my parent hat on and go, what do I expect to do as a parent? And then as a therapist going, well, what would I expect of a parent? And these sort of things can be really hard to put down as a hard and fast rule.
Yeah.
And I think, what are considered reasonable parental responsibilities, obviously there are some clear expectations there, and I'll outline what NDIS considers those. I just find it a really hard question to answer, a really hard one to get my head around, because we're talking about parenting a young person with additional needs, and so there is a lot more that's expected of those parents.
Yes.
And that comes with a lot more stress, a lot more time, a lot more, just everything. Everything's a lot more. And is that considered reasonable?
Yeah. It is really tough, isn't it? And, you and I both do functional capacity assessments, or FCAs, in which we're perhaps advocating for additional support for families at home, where we do feel that perhaps the support requirements that they're managing extend beyond what you might expect for a parent. And a lot of that does come into, maybe it's not inappropriate that a parent would support in certain routines around meal preparation or in dressing tasks, in bathing or washing. But I guess what we look at, though, is, how much can that young person support in that? Can they support at all? What's the ratio of the support requirements too? Often we might hear that parents are juggling in a 2-to-1 ratio for certain routines, which extends beyond what you might expect for that young person given their age. And I guess I often get parents to consider as well the amount of external scaffolding or support, or how they have to set that up, the time requirements to do that. That I can very much appreciate for a lot of those families. That's what they know in running the household and supporting the young people within that. But when we're actually reflecting on that extends beyond what you might typically expect and warrants further support and more formal supports in place.
So some of the reasonable parental responsibilities, from NDIS are, basic care and supervision, feeding, bathing, dressing, those sort of things, which I can understand. Providing safe, supportive home, transport to the school, healthcare appointments, community activities, helping with education such as homework and whatnot, although a lot of schools don't do homework anymore, so maybe not as needed. Encouraging social interaction, inclusion, age-appropriate guidance and discipline. Fine. These are the things that are not considered funded by the NDIS and are considered reasonable parental responsibility. But then there's also some where I'm like, well, transport to healthcare appointments or community activities, and sometimes those things are within hours that the parent might need to work, and so they can't have that opportunity to do that. And it might be this person can't actually access a mainstream community space. And so they do need someone else to support them. Even social interaction can be, how many kids do we have that social interaction is so challenging, and therefore a parent might not be the right person to do that, and I'm thinking of, like a teenager that might struggle to engage socially, but that's a huge goal. But they don't want to go with their parent. To a space,
juggling that too.
So is that parental responsibility? Maybe, but is it also responsibility of a parent to be able to advocate for the needs of this young person to have access to support, such as support workers or other supports to increase their capacity? I don't know how much this changes, but it is really hard for me as a clinician to be so prescriptive about what I think is fair and reasonable. And putting my parent hat on, there is no point where I'm working with a parent going, you're not doing enough for your child.
No,
because no one I just don't think that's even fair because no one knows everyone's situation.
No.
Right?
And I just feel like everyone's in any circumstance is just always using what they have in the toolbox to do the very best that they can.
Yep. And so it gets very hard to then say that person doesn't need that support or doesn't deserve that support. Or, we talk about what goes beyond responsibilities in the age of a child, and I go, okay, if you've got a 14-year-old that has significant needs and still needs support with dressing and toiling and those sort of things, is that still considered parental support? Is that still considered something that NDIS would say, yep, that's feeding and bathing and dressing, basic care needs, and maybe it is, maybe it's not. I don't know. And I think sometimes that can be tricky because, it's just a challenging situation to get consistency on because of how different everybody's situation is. And so for me, the question came out as a result of reasonable expectations, because I think for a lot of families that I work with and yourself as well, I think what they are managing is beyond what I would consider reasonable.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I sound like I'm getting on top, on my soapbox here, but I think it's really important that we do, bring light to the fact that it is the responsibility of us as health professionals to look for what is considered reasonable and necessary and advocate for additional supports as needed, and for parents to go, just because that's how you've done it doesn't mean that is actually reasonable and necessary.
Yeah.
It might actually be that you have managed that for so long and that's actually really, really hard.
Yep.
And seeking additional assistance is exactly what is needed.
For sure. And if that means that we can then support the capacity for the parents so that they're not, they're not trying to pour from an empty cup, then they can actually, have what they need in their corner as well to be able to keep supporting their young people as they have been.
Yep.
Yeah, and I guess something like a functional capacity assessment can help to understand what that support requirement looks like, but importantly put it in the context of their developmental profile and what those needs might look like. Because yes, perhaps it's not maybe enough on its own to go, well, they need lots of support and help with dressing. It's actually, well, in looking at this broader picture, this is why, and this extends beyond what one might expect for their age group.
So we'll keep the parent theme ongoing. The next one was about managing therapy expectation when one parent is on board and the other one isn't. And I guess when I think of that, I'm thinking that maybe one parent has chosen to access a service and another parent's going, that's fine, but I'm not necessarily on board. Or it could also be the other end where it's like one parent's accessing the service, the other parent doesn't want to have anything to do with that, doesn't believe it's needed. Yeah. There is a bit of a
doesn't
a
understand
spectrum.
what the purpose of that might be, what that support can look like. Yeah.
And
especially when it comes to OT, I feel like so many families come to our practice who maybe they've been referred by their teacher or maybe they're talking to someone that they know, but so many people don't know much about OT in the pediatric space until they're referred, and then they're coming here for the first time and go, I actually don't know how this is going to help, and I don't know what I'm going to get from this. I do know I'm looking for some additional support, but I don't know how this all fits into the picture.
So if they do have that question, our previous episode talked exactly on that about OT 101 and what OT does in Australia, what that looks like. So if they have any questions, go to that episode. But you're absolutely right. And I'm sure you're talking about it quite passionately because you've obviously seen this many times.
Yeah. And I think how tricky for parents too when maybe they've managed similar things when they were younger and they were supported through that at the time by people in their support network, and then they're sort of reflecting on that going, oh, but it's just, I was the same and it, I'm all good.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
It does.
It does happen a lot.
And I really respect that, but also understanding when there might be an opportunity to build out that toolbox like we were referencing just before, or to gain some additional insights and to help give that maturation boost, to start that process, I think can be really positive as well.
When I'm faced with this situation, I'm always looking at the buy-in of the parent that's referred on or that's bringing that young person in is pretty high.
Yes.
Right. So they've obviously had that conversation, and whether or not the other parent is on board or not, they've made that decision, and that's great. You know, they feel confident that's the right decision. But how are you trying to? What strategies do you use when you're trying to encourage that other parent who might not be quite aware or might not be as on board?
Yeah.
To see the benefit of coming to this space?
I guess for me, I always start with the kind of education piece. Like I can recognize that there might be a gap in their understanding of what the service offers, what the outcomes are looking to be, what we're working on and why, and go, hey, can we actually just, what if we were to all sit down together and I can share with you a little bit more about what I'm doing? You can ask me any questions that you have and start to unpack that more directly. Sometimes I do appreciate that it can be when they're in sessions and then maybe some of those things are starting to generalize or translate, and then they're seeing some of those benefits and improvement over time. Maybe things can start to solidify there, but I do always like to offer from the outset to go, I really understand where they might be coming from with that. I want you guys to feel empowered in this process, and I want you to feel like you've got a good understanding about what we're doing here. Can we just sit down all together and go through that? Or can we have a phone call? Is there something I can put together? Can I, refer you to some resources to help understand that further?
Yeah. And I guess in that way, by doing that, you're looking for, whether it's common ground across your observations as well as what both parents are seeing. And I think when you have those conversations, inevitably you find there might be one or two things that the parent who might not be as on board notices, and you go, okay, so you do notice there's that.
Yeah.
So how much, and they might say, well, that's not really a big issue.
Yeah.
And go, yep, that's fine. But to that other parent, it might be a huge concern.
Yeah.
And I think we could talk for hours about different things that one parent might think versus the other, and different parenting styles and whatnot. But I think when we're talking about therapy, it's almost like reverse engineering it and going, okay, what's the rather than focusing so much on what one parent wants versus the other, what's the ultimate goal for this young person?
Yeah.
The ultimate goal is for this young person to be the best person they can be.
Yep.
And one parent's gone, I can access that through therapy.
Yep.
And the other parent has said, maybe that's not as required, but we got to find the common ground to say, obviously one person thinks that they need additional support to be the best person they can be. So how do we work together as a collective to do that?
Yeah.
I think sometimes, this is a generalization, but I do find I have these conversations more with dads.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm not, being a father myself, I'm not putting us all in that category, saying that we don't care about therapy, because sometimes they're not seeing that therapy, they're not always attending. And again, it's not always the case, but I've just from my own personal experience, I've found I've had more of these conversations with dads because they have found it harder to see what we do lining up to how it's going to benefit or support.
Yeah, definitely.
The young person.
Yeah.
And I have spent a fair bit of time trying to just listen to what they're saying, or the reasons as to maybe why they don't need it, or the reasons to what their reasons for being a bit apprehensive about it. And so I think sometimes even that listening without trying to convince them can be a really good way just to validate and to hear out, because a lot of the time there are some valid points.
Yeah, very true. Even hearing, I think you're right in hearing what maybe their concern is, or with their perspective, I guess maybe more than anything, to go, look, I can really hear that, having gone through this process. This is some of the things that we've identified. What do we want that to look like? And that's probably helping to bridge some of those gaps as well. And at the end of the day, I guess that's, the wonderful parents that come through our spaces or any service are the experts in their young people, and they just having to work out, well, how can they best support them to be, like you said, the best version of themselves, and what do they want that to look like? I think as therapists, like that's what we always have to respect as well.
And like you said, education is key. And I think this is where education about what OT is, like as you said at the start, sometimes I'm telling them why OT. Well, sometimes they come in with why OT, and we're having to tell them this is what OT is and what it actually looks like. And that's probably, on us as occupational therapists to get better at promoting ourselves and what our service actually looks like.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes when I do get a skeptical parent or parent that's not on board, I go, that's actually, I don't want that to be a negative thing. I don't want that person to see it as a negative thing. I want it to be seen as you're not just buying into anything.
Yeah, that's
You're
true.
going
You should
in
challenge it.
Yeah, I think I really encourage that challenge to go, okay, you want evidence or you want advice or you want to be, again, not as I said, not convinced, but that person just wants to feel as though what they are signing their young person up for is going to be of benefit for them.
For sure.
I remember one story, this is years ago, when I was quite a young therapist and I was working with one lad and he was really tricky and he was one of my trickier clients at the time, and his dad was just absolutely not on board. And as a new grad, was a couple of years in, I was like, gosh, what do I do? And I just remember this one session we had was fantastic. It was such an amazing session, and dad was like, this child-led stuff is not right. It's not working. And this young boy is really, really anxious, beautiful kid, but super anxious. And this is before the days of PDA.
Yeah, gotcha.
Definitely would have met a PDA profile.
Yeah.
But I just remember this one session and it was great. And dad was in, and I just remember him saying, oh, that was worth the money. And I remember, I got what I paid for sort of thing. And I was like, I remember sitting there going, how do I feel?
Yeah.
How do I feel? Is that a win? Is that a good thing or not? But I took it as his way of saying, I have invested this time and I'm not fully convinced, but in that moment I'm seeing something, and that's enough for me to just say that was worth the money.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, that's enough for me.
Yeah.
And this is where I think, if you're a new therapist or any therapist, if you have a parent like this or you do have this situation, is not to take it on as it's a problem with you.
No.
It's very much on that parent who is trying to see how this fits into their life and the value of it.
Yeah.
And getting feedback can be really good. Sometimes the feedback's not the nicest to hear.
No.
But if it's taken in the right way, and if you're able to use that as a way to build your own skills, that's going to build you as a therapist so much.
And I think the more proactive conversations that you can have too, where you're explaining from the outset what you're doing and why, that they're things that can solidify over time too and help in, I guess, unpacking that expectation and making sure people are on the same page. Actually, I've never forgotten. I think probably one of my biggest experiences with something like this is it was also my new grad year, and I was working with a young person who is nonverbal, quite busy, such a beautiful, beautiful kid, and helping to explain to the family like, this is what I'm doing in this moment, this is what I'm working on. And I think that understanding was like, look, I get what you're saying, but actually, it was like, I get it, but I don't get it. Whereas, the words you're saying, I can make sense of that, but I can't see how this is going to translate, and I can't see how this is going to help me with the things that I'm working on. I can't see how you playing in that way is going to help me with my functional challenges that I navigate at home. And I remember even through some of those conversations going, okay, there's an opportunity here. Let's flesh that out even further. And I think that was almost, I never really felt like it was resolve, that we really felt strong in that. But I think just slowly over time, and this young person loved coming as well. So I think that was such a big motivator to go, well, he loves coming here. I'm told I'm going to get something from this. And they've been long-term engages with the service now, which is really interesting. But I think the perspective about how the space supports this young person is quite different depending if you're talking to the parent or the therapist. But you can just only hope that with that continued collaboration that you can work towards something that feels very, very together and on the same page.
Yeah. Well, I think that's probably good advice then, isn't it? Is to be able to find those commonalities and sometimes time.
Yeah.
And clarity, being really clear and being upfront and just being honest. And I think, as a new grad, it's really hard because you don't have all the answers.
No.
But sometimes it's okay to be honest about that.
Yeah.
And that's very much on that parent to go, well, is this the right service or not? And it's hard being a parent, and it's hard being a therapist as well. So don't make it any harder than it needs to be. If you validate and acknowledge that both journeys are hard, then at the end of the day, you just want what's best for that young person.
Definitely.
All right. Well, as I said at the top of the episode, got any questions? podcast@otfcgroup.au. That's our email. Otherwise, OTFC Group at Instagram. And we can answer and filter as many questions as you want. The more along the episodes, the more information that you get. So a lot of learning to come from it. Before we head off, give our one quick shout out to Mr. Fletch. I know you're still listening. Definitely is. It's on his hot
And your dad
list.
likes to hear the shout out too.
Does he? Yes, he does. He does. All the way over in Paris at the moment. So I hope he's enjoying listening to the episode. I wonder if their like Spotify wrap up will be number one integration station. That's a goal for anybody out there. Any key listeners, make sure it's number one. But until next time, thank you all, and speak to you soon.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, everyone.